Hello again. I know that through talks and through Sunday school and general interactions about the Bible and the Lord, that a lot of people seem to have a hard time understanding how the Trinity is, and specifically how God and Jesus Christ can be the same but different. It can be the Father and a Son, but yet be equal. Like I said, be considered one. If you see me, you see the Father. Scriptures from Christ. I'm going to try to explain a little bit of that as best I can using Batman. A little while back in the 90s, they had a little show called Batman the Animated Series. And then there's a character called Clayface. Clayface is a Batman character that is considered a villain on there. And he, through some medical experiments, you know how it is in the comic books, gained the abilities and the curse of being like a big clay figure. He's humanoid, but he's shaped like clay, and he has basically the powers of Plastic Man in a way, as far as he can create spikes or walls from his hand and bricks and different weapons from himself. But he also can become another person, a chair, a wall itself, things like that. Well, in the series, after a battle, Clayface is almost disintegrated. He pulls himself together, and in a show called Growing Pains, Clayface is weak, so he takes from himself, and like I said, he can create things, and he creates from himself a little girl that's just later called Annie. And he sends Annie out to learn about what's going on, if there's any danger, if Batman's around, things like that, whatever. Well, the further Annie gets away from Clayface, the more that she forgets, because whenever Clayface creates her, he creates her as this little girl, like I said, he creates her to have her own little personality and things like that. But like I said, as further she got away from him, she forgets who he is, and she can feel him when he comes around, when he gets better and he's trying to hunt her down because he wants to reintegrate her because it's a part of him back into himself. Well, she doesn't understand this. She gets scared. Robin gets involved. Batman gets involved. And later on during the little episode, a fight ensues between Batman, Robin, Clayface. Some stuff happens. Clayface gets hit by Batman. Some of his parts splatter, and it hits Annie on the arm, and she absorbs Clayface into her. Well, at that moment, she starts regaining her memories because, of course, Clayface becomes, is a part of her, and whenever she absorbs the memories. And she tells Robin, she says, I am him. She said, I'm not Clayface's daughter. I am him. And whenever she said that, I was like, oh my goodness, that is so much like what Jesus is trying to explain about the Trinity and about him and the Father. And it's just, sometimes we try to overthink it, maybe we underthink it, but we just kind of get lost. And I'm not saying that Clayface is representing God and the little girl is representing Jesus. I'm saying this is a good way to look at it. She was a separate part from Clayface, had her own little personality, her own thoughts, her own fears, things that made her laugh. And yet she was still physically also Clayface himself. And eventually he absorbed her back into himself, and they became one again. Because, he's the bad guy. And according to Robin, he killed her. But he just absorbed a part of himself back into himself. Well, with God, he took a part of himself away from him and made Jesus Christ, but he didn't really make him, because Jesus Christ is not a created being. Therefore, whenever God took a portion of himself and set it aside and said, this is me, but different, and this is Christ, because Christ, it says, is there at the beginning of the formation of time. He was there before there was a thing called time, which is a creation in itself by God. There was Jesus. Jesus is not created being like all the angels and anything else in the universe. He is actually a portion of God himself that's set aside from God by God. And which goes back to John, first chapter, 1 through 5th verse, if you look at that. It's so evident whenever you look at it that way that Jesus is completely unique in so many. And then whenever he became begotten through a female, then he was God's only begotten. He's even more so than Adam. God created Adam, but Jesus was already there, a portion of God, and was born into the world through a living vessel so that God could experience on our level everything. So there's no more, God, you just don't understand. It's like, oh, I understand completely. I was there. Because just like whenever the little splatters of Clayface entered into the little Annie, she absorbed his memories, something like that, not just like it. Similar to that with God and Jesus, only difference is they're completely connected all the time. And they can communicate through ways that we can't even really imagine. And so God experienced things through Jesus, and Jesus can convey that back to God in a way that, like I said, is beyond normal communication that we would call communication. But I get excited about that because it makes me happy that there's something that you can really look at that helps describe what the Trinity kind of is. And I believe the Holy Ghost is another extension of God. And it's not a created being. Like I said, every angel and every other thing that's in this universe, spiritual and physical, including the spiritual, are created except for what God has set aside, which is a part of himself, because God is not a created being. And that's a whole another understanding. And really, to understand how God is not a created being and that he just is, and that he is the great I am, you really have to read John, first chapter, but also just pray about it. And God will reveal it to you. He revealed it to me way back whenever I think I was in the 7th grade. And then, later on, I read about it. God will reveal it to you too. But, like I said, watch the little cartoon. It's called Growing Pains. And have an open mind and think about how God is light. And Jesus Christ is a separated portion of him before the beginning of time. It's always been there. He really has always been there. And to me, it just kind of makes more sense. And how that he can always be there forever. And how he really is the intercessor. How he is God and man. He really is a portion of God. He is God. And he also is the Christ. He's separate, but the same. Watch the little cartoon. Can't really see it on YouTube. So I don't think you can see all of it, but you can see excerpts. Maybe you can rent it. I don't know. I bought the DVD just so I could show it to people. It's pretty neat. It's how Batman the Animated Series can help explain how Jesus and God himself are one. Thanks.